There is a grain growing across 3 continents that contains 200% more magnesium than spinach. It produces complete protein, rivaling eggs and meat. It self-seeds so aggressively that one planting creates a permanent food supply. Ancient empires built civilizations on it. Then one empire tried to erase it from existence by cutting off the hands of anyone caught growing it. The grain survived, you just never learned its name. And at the end of this video, you will know exactly how to grow permanent food infrastructure in your backyard without replanting, without purchasing seed, without depending on anyone. Walk into any health food store today, you will find shelves dedicated to protein powders extracted from peas and processed in factories. You will find magnesium supplements shipped from facilities across oceans. You will find products promising complete amino acid profiles at premium prices. Meanwhile, a single grain delivers all of this from a plant that returns every spring without permission. The numbers do not lie. Per 100 grams of uncooked grain, this plant delivers 248 milligrams of magnesium. That represents 59% of your daily requirement in a single serving. Now consider spinach, the vegetable that Western nutrition celebrates as the gold standard for magnesium. Raw spinach contains 79 milligrams per 100 grams. The difference is not marginal. The difference is fundamental. But magnesium is just the beginning. This grain contains 7.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. That covers 42% of your daily iron needs. The calcium content rivals dairy. The fiber content exceeds most whole grains. And the protein story changes everything you thought you knew about plant nutrition. For decades, nutritionists repeated a simple claim: plant proteins are incomplete. They lack essential amino acids. You need to combine foods carefully or eat animal products to get complete nutrition. This grain destroys that narrative entirely. Researchers analyzing this grain found all 9 essential amino acids present: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, valine. Every single amino acid your body cannot produce on its own exists in this grain. Scientists measured its biological value at 75, closer to perfect than any other grain protein ever tested. The lysine content alone rewrites the rules. Lysine is the amino acid most commonly deficient in cereal grains. It plays critical roles in calcium absorption, collagen production, and immune function. This grain contains 5.3 to 6.3% lysine in its protein. That is roughly twice the lysine content of wheat and 3 times that of maize. The grain that feeds billions worldwide cannot match what this forgotten crop delivers. And yet there is more. The leaves of this plant contain more than twice the antioxidants of spinach, more polyphenols than kale. Both the grain and the greens are edible, meaning one plant provides 2 distinct food sources from a single planting. The question forms naturally: if this grain outperforms spinach in magnesium, rivals meat in protein quality, and provides more antioxidants than celebrated superfoods, why have most people in the Western world never heard of it? The answer requires traveling back 8,000 years. In the highlands of Oaxaca, Mexico, ancient peoples first cultivated this grain between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago. The Mayans recognized its value and passed the knowledge forward through generations. But it was the Aztec Empire that elevated this crop to something approaching sacred status. By 1400, the Aztec Empire had codified this grain as one of 3 mandatory tribute crops. 17 provinces across the empire were required to send annual tribute to the capital city of Tenochtitlan. The quantity was staggering. 20,000 tons of this grain flowed into the imperial capital every single year. Picture the great marketplaces of Tenochtitlan. Spanish conquistadors who witnessed these markets described them as larger and more organized than any in Europe. In the grain sections, this crop occupied prominent space alongside maize and beans. Farmers brought it from villages across the empire. Merchants traded it by the basket. Families ground it into flour for daily meals. But the grain served purposes beyond simple nutrition. During festivals honoring Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war, priests performed elaborate ceremonies that terrified Spanish observers. They mixed the grain flour with honey and sometimes with sacrificial blood to form a dough called squalene. Artisans sculpted this dough into figures representing their gods. Priests paraded these figures through the streets of Tenochtitlan while thousands watched. Then the figures were broken apart, and the people ate them. This ritual proved catastrophic for the grain's future. In 1519, Hernán Cortés arrived on the coast of Mexico with roughly 500 soldiers. Within 2 years, the Aztec Empire would collapse. And with its fall came a systematic campaign of cultural destruction that specifically targeted this grain. The Spanish conquistadors and the Catholic Church viewed the squalene ceremonies with horror. To their eyes, indigenous people were creating idols of their gods and consuming them in a ritual that looked disturbingly similar to Catholic communion. This was blasphemy of the highest order. The response was swift and brutal. Colonial authorities banned cultivation of this grain outright. They burned fields where it grew. They issued decrees making its production illegal across the conquered territories. And for those who defied the ban, the punishment was severe. Growing this grain could result in having your hands cut off. Some faced execution. Consider what this reveals about the grain's importance. The Spanish did not ban maize. They did not ban beans. They did not systematically destroy cacao, despite its role in Aztec rituals. They chose to eliminate specifically this grain precisely because of its sacred significance to indigenous culture. Colonial administrators understood something that modern historians sometimes miss. Depriving a population of a sacred food weakens that population spiritually and physically. Aztec warriors ate this grain before battle for strength. Priests used it in ceremonies that bound communities together. By eliminating the grain, the Spanish eliminated a pillar of indigenous identity. The campaign nearly succeeded. Across central Mexico, cultivation of this grain dropped to almost nothing. Farmers who had grown it for generations stopped planting. Fields that had produced 20,000 tons annually fell silent. But the grain had one advantage that empire could not overcome. It grows like a weed. In the remote mountains of Oaxaca, far from Spanish colonial centers, indigenous communities continued cultivating this grain in secret. The Mayans, whose territories remained partially outside Spanish control, maintained their crops. And in fields across the former Aztec Empire, the grain volunteered itself. Even when no one planted it, seeds from previous harvests germinated in disturbed soil. The plant that empire tried to destroy kept returning. For nearly 500 years, this grain existed in shadows. Spanish colonial records ignored it. European botanical texts overlooked it. When scientists began cataloging global crops in the 1800s, this grain received minimal attention. The plant was technically known, but practically invisible. It was not until the 1970s that Western researchers began examining what had been lost. Scientists studying alternative crops discovered a grain with properties that seemed almost designed for the challenges facing modern agriculture. And what they found explains why this grain may be more important for human survival than any crop currently dominating global food systems. The grain belongs to a special category of plants that use C4 photosynthesis. Most crops, including wheat, rice, and soybeans, use C3 photosynthesis. The technical difference matters enormously in a warming world. C4 plants show higher water use efficiency. They maintain higher photosynthesis rates under elevated temperatures, and they thrive even in nitrogen-poor soil where other crops struggle. As climate change accelerates, traditional crops face mounting stress. Droughts reduce yields, heat waves damage harvests. Unpredictable rainfall patterns disrupt planting schedules. Farmers across the American Midwest watch their corn wither during summer heat domes. Rice paddies in Southeast Asia face saltwater intrusion from rising seas. Wheat harvests in Southern Europe decline year after year. This grain offers something different. Researchers have confirmed its exceptional tolerance to drought. Once established, the plant survives on minimal water. It tolerates high salinity soils that would kill conventional crops. It adapts to both hilly terrain and open plains. It continues producing grain through conditions that devastate other harvests. The yield potential is equally remarkable. In Missouri, agricultural trials routinely achieve 1,000 pounds per acre. Some trials have doubled that figure. Across South and Central America, yields reach 4,600 to 7,200 kilograms per hectare under optimal conditions. A single plant can produce more than 500 grams of grain. But the self-seeding characteristic truly sets this grain apart. The seeds are extraordinarily small, between 850 and 1,700 seeds per gram. A single plant produces thousands of these tiny seeds. When harvest occurs, some seeds inevitably fall to the ground. They remain viable in soil for years. When spring arrives, they germinate without human intervention. Farmers who grow this grain describe a phenomenon that sounds almost miraculous to those accustomed to annual seed purchases. You plant once. The following year, volunteers appear where seeds dropped during harvest. The year after that, more volunteers. Within a few seasons, the grain has naturalized. It returns each spring without permission, without purchase, without planting. One farm in the northeastern United States documented this directly. After several years of cultivation, the grain seeded itself so prolifically that farmers now harvest young plants as a thinning method. They eat the greens throughout summer and still harvest grain at season's end. The crop has become self-sustaining infrastructure. This characteristic explains one of the deeper mysteries surrounding this grain's obscurity. Modern agricultural systems depend on repeat purchases. Farmers spend $60 billion annually on seeds globally. Corn, soy, wheat, cotton, all annual crops requiring new seed every planting season. The business model demands repetition. Farmers must buy again and again and again. A self-seeding grain breaks this model entirely. Buy seed once, plant once, harvest forever. No corporation benefits from this transaction. No quarterly earnings improve. No shareholder value increases. The pattern extends beyond seed sales. This grain requires minimal processing for consumption. You can cook the whole grain like rice. You can grind it into flour with simple equipment. You can pop it like popcorn with nothing but a dry pan and heat. No industrial facility is required, no extraction technology to license, no complex supply chain to maintain. Compare this to the foods that dominate Western grocery shelves. Protein powders require factory processing. Magnesium supplements require extraction and encapsulation. Breakfast cereals require industrial transformation of raw ingredients. Each step adds cost. Each step adds profit margin. Each step adds distance between the food and the person eating it. A grain that requires almost no processing cannot generate processing revenue. A crop that requires no annual seed purchases cannot generate seed company profits. A food that grows itself cannot be controlled by the systems that control other foods. This is not conspiracy. This is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. Universities pursue grants from available sources. The sources favor patentable interventions. A self-seeding ancient grain cannot be patented. The funding flows elsewhere. The research follows the funding. The knowledge gaps persist. And yet the market is finally awakening to what indigenous peoples knew for millennia. The global amaranth market size was estimated at $13.9 billion in 2025 and is expected to reach $21.8 billion by 2033, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 6%. Global amaranth cultivation exceeded 600,000 hectares in 2024. In the United States alone, amaranth cultivation covers approximately 12,000 hectares, producing nearly 30,000 metric tons of grain annually. Asia-Pacific now dominates the amaranth market with the largest revenue share of nearly 43%. The region has a large population of health-conscious consumers who are increasingly adopting plant-based diets and looking for healthy and nutritious food products, leading to an increase in demand for amaranth. The region has also seen a growing trend of gluten-free products due to increasing awareness of gluten intolerance and celiac disease. And as amaranth is naturally gluten-free, it has become a popular ingredient. Yet despite this explosive market growth, most Western consumers still do not know the grain's name. The growth happens in specialty health stores, in Asian markets, in Latin American groceries. Mainstream supermarkets continue dedicating aisle space to processed alternatives, while this ancient grain remains confined to obscure sections. And yet some institutions recognize this grain's extraordinary potential. NASA scientists studying crops for long-duration space missions identified this grain as exceptionally promising. The reasons align perfectly with space agriculture requirements: high nutrient density in minimal growing space, tolerance for harsh conditions, edible leaves and seeds providing dietary variety. National Geographic reported that NASA recommended this grain for consumption in space missions. The World Health Organization named it a well-balanced food suitable for global nutrition programs. Research published in peer-reviewed journals confirms that amaranth may find wide application in the prevention and treatment of some civilization diseases such as ischemic heart disease, allergy, type 2 diabetes, and celiac disease. The health benefits attributed include decreasing plasma cholesterol levels, stimulating the immune system, exerting an anti-tumor activity, reducing blood glucose levels, and improving conditions of hypertension and anemia. The grain contains squalene, a compound previously sourced primarily from shark liver oil. Cosmetic and pharmaceutical companies prize squalene for its properties. Shark populations suffered from harvesting pressure to meet demand. Amaranth oil includes 5 to 8% squalene, a compound also found in olive oil but typically at 0.5 to 1%. More accessible, more affordable, more sustainable than hunting sharks. Some animal studies have found that amaranth may have cholesterol-lowering properties. One study in hamsters showed that amaranth oil decreased total and bad LDL cholesterol by 15% and 22% respectively. Russian researchers found that patients with coronary heart disease and hypertension showed benefits from including amaranth in their diets, with significant decreases in total cholesterol, triglycerides, and LDL. Several studies have found that amaranth could have an anti-inflammatory effect in the body. In one test tube study, amaranth was found to reduce several markers of inflammation. Lysine is a peptide identified in amaranth that is widely thought to have cancer-preventive benefits as well as possibly blocking inflammation that accompanies several chronic health conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Additional bioactive peptides in amaranth protein were found to have antihypertensive properties. Yet this research remained largely invisible to Western consumers. The studies existed in scientific journals that ordinary people never read. The findings appeared in publications written in technical language. No marketing budget promoted the results. No supplement company funded awareness campaigns. The knowledge accumulated in academic databases while grocery stores continued to sell products that this grain could partially replace. The global picture reveals the absurdity of Western ignorance. Across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, millions of people eat this grain and its greens regularly. In India, traditional dishes incorporate the leaves into everyday cooking. Nigerian cuisine features the greens in stewed preparations that have fed families for generations. Vietnamese soups use the plant in recipes passed down through centuries. The grain represents something profound. It is one of those foods that history tried to erase but could not. Colonial powers burned the fields. They cut off the hands of farmers. They banned cultivation under penalty of death. They succeeded in removing the grain from Western consciousness for 500 years, and still it grows. The ancient Greeks understood this about the plant. They named it with a word meaning the never-fading, one that does not wither. They recognize something eternal in this crop that produces food, drops its seeds, and returns the following year without asking permission from anyone. Now the question shifts from history to practice. How do you actually grow this grain yourself? The process is remarkably simple. The grain thrives in USDA zones 4 through 10. This covers most of the continental United States and equivalent climate zones across Europe, Australia, and temperate Asia. If you can grow tomatoes, you can grow this grain. Start with your planting window. The grain is frost sensitive, so wait until after your last frost date to direct sow seeds in the garden. Alternatively, start seeds indoors 6 weeks before your last frost for transplanting later. The seeds germinate quickly within 3 to 4 days if temperatures stay between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Choose a location with full sun. The grain tolerates partial shade but produces best in direct sunlight. Soil requirements are forgiving. The plant adapts to clay, loam, or sandy soils. It tolerates poor fertility that would limit other crops. Rich, moist soil produces the highest yields, but the grain survives and produces even in marginal conditions. Plant seeds about 1/4 inch deep. Space plants roughly 12 inches apart, though crowding is tolerated. Water during establishment, particularly in the first few weeks after germination. Once established, watering becomes optional. The grain is drought-tolerant enough to survive on natural rainfall in most climates. During extended dry periods, water once or twice weekly. The growing season spans 40 to 50 days for leaf harvest and longer for grain production. Throughout summer, harvest leaves for eating fresh or cooked. The greens taste similar to spinach with slightly more earthy depth. Use them in salads. Wilt them as a side dish. Add them to soups and stews. The nutritional profile exceeds spinach in antioxidants and rivals it in other nutrients. As summer progresses, the plant develops dramatic seed heads. Some varieties produce brilliant red or purple plumes. Others show gold or green. These seed heads attract attention in any garden, providing ornamental value alongside food production. Allow some plants to fully mature and set seed. When the seed heads dry and begin dropping seeds, harvest by cutting the heads and placing them in paper bags. Shake the bags to separate seeds from chaff. Store dried seeds in airtight containers for future planting or for eating. Store seeds in a cool, dry place. The grain cooks like any whole grain. Simmer 1 part grain in 2.5 parts water for about 20 minutes until the water absorbs. The cooked grain has a slightly nutty flavor and a texture some describe as a bit gelatinous. Use it as a base for grain bowls. Add it to soups for protein and texture. Mix it into baked goods for nutritional enhancement. Popping the grain requires only a dry, hot pan. Heat the pan over high heat. Add a small amount of grain in a single layer. The seeds pop within seconds, puffing up like tiny popcorn. The popped grain makes excellent cereal, snack food, or topping for other dishes. In Mexico, this popped grain combines with honey or molasses and sometimes chocolate to create a traditional candy called alegria. The word translates to joy in English. Street vendors across Mexico City sell alegria in bars and shapes that have delighted children for generations. The tradition survived colonial suppression and continues today in markets where conquistadors once walked. For the self-seeding promise, simply allow some plants to drop their seeds naturally. Do not harvest every seed head. Leave some to mature and scatter. The following spring, watch for volunteer seedlings appearing where seeds fell. Thin these volunteers as needed. Eat the thinnings as greens. Let remaining plants grow to maturity. Repeat forever. Within a few growing seasons, you will have established a permanent food source. The grain returns each spring without purchase. It requires no expensive inputs. It feeds you protein, magnesium, iron, and antioxidants while demanding almost nothing in return. This is what resilience actually looks like. Not stockpiles of packaged foods that eventually expire. Not supplements manufactured in distant factories. Not dependence on supply chains that stretch across oceans and can break at any moment. Resilience is a plant that returns every spring without asking, a plant that feeds you, provides medicine, and replants itself while you sleep. The supplement industry will not tell you about this grain. They generate billions in annual revenue selling processed nutrients extracted from various sources. A backyard plant that provides superior nutrition threatens the entire business model. The seed industry will not promote this grain. Their profits depend on repeat purchases every planting season. A crop that self-seeds forever generates exactly one sale and then eliminates future demand. The processed food industry has no interest in this grain. They profit from complexity, from transformation, from adding value through manufacturing steps. A grain you can cook whole or pop in a pan needs no industrial processing and therefore generates no industrial profit. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. Economic systems see what benefits economic systems. Marketing budgets flow to products with profit margins. Research funding follows patentable opportunities, a self-seeding ancient grain that cannot be patented, and requires no processing simply falls outside the system's field of vision. But you see it now. You know that a grain exists with 200% more magnesium than spinach. You know it contains complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids. You know it survived 500 years of suppression by colonial powers who burned fields and severed hands. You know it self-seeds forever once established. You know NASA considered it for space missions. And the World Health Organization recommended it for global nutrition. You know its name now, amaranth. The Aztecs called it huautli. They built an empire partly on its nutritional foundation. They wove it into ceremonies that bound communities together. Spanish conquistadors tried to eliminate it from human memory. They failed. The plant waited. It always waits. Amaranth has grown across the Americas for 8,000 years. It survived the collapse of civilizations. It survived colonization. It survived 5 centuries of deliberate erasure. It survived being ignored by the most powerful food systems in human history. And it is still there, still growing, still producing more magnesium than spinach, still offering complete protein, still dropping seeds that germinate the following spring. The seed companies will not tell you. The supplement industry will not tell you. The agricultural establishment will not tell you. The information threatens too many revenue streams. But amaranth does not care about revenue streams. It cares about reproduction. It cares about spreading. It cares about establishing itself wherever soil and sunlight permit. For 8,000 years, this grain has pursued a single agenda. It will continue for 8,000 more. The question was never, why did ancient civilizations hide this grain? They did not hide anything. Aztec farmers grew it in quantities that staggered European observers. Mexican families today make alegria the same way their ancestors did before Columbus was born. African, Asian, and Latin American cuisines feature amaranth in dishes that have fed billions over centuries. The question is why Western systems failed to notice. Why did grocery stores fill with processed magnesium supplements while a plant delivering 3 times the magnesium of spinach grew unmentioned? Why did protein powder become a billion-dollar industry while a complete protein grain remained in obscure health food bins? Why did 500 years pass between colonial suppression and the moment you first heard what amaranth actually offers? The answer is structural. What cannot be patented cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter consciousness. What does not enter consciousness does not exist for practical purposes. Multiple generations of Westerners grew up without knowing amaranth's name, not because anyone actively suppressed the information, because no one profited from spreading it. Researchers now recognize that amaranth may be a key factor in reducing hunger in underdeveloped countries. Amaranth should be recognized as one of the extremely promising nutritional and healthy crops with great potential to feed the global population. This potential is still underexploited. Due to climate change, the problem of world hunger, and changes in crop profiles in European and other countries around the world, it is becoming desirable to look for new plants with high nutritional potential that can be combined with health benefits. Amaranth is a plant with valuable qualities as food, and additionally with many valuable health properties. Additional important advantages of this plant are satisfactory yield performance, drought resistance, and enhanced photosynthesis. You know now. You know the numbers, you know the history, you know the science, you know the economics, and you know how to grow it. One planting, forever food. That is the promise amaranth made to humanity 8,000 years ago. It is a promise the plant keeps to this day for anyone willing to learn its name and put seeds in soil. The hands they cut off for growing this grain belong to farmers who understood something we are only now relearning. Some foods are more than nutrition. Some foods are infrastructure. Some foods are resistance. Amaranth is all 3. Find seeds, plant them, harvest leaves and grain. Let some seeds drop. Watch volunteers appear the following spring. Repeat until the pattern becomes permanent. The grain that empire tried to erase now grows in your awareness. What you do with this knowledge determines whether it also grows in your garden.